Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on gender, energy access, and women's empowerment. Welcome on behalf of Sustainable Energy for All and the People-Centered Accelerator. I'm Caroline McGregor. I lead our gender and energy access work here, and I am so happy that so many of you could join us today for this third of 3 webinars on the topic, the very important topic of gender and energy access. The objective here is to allow members of the People-Centered Accelerator, as well as others, to get fully briefed on the depth and breadth of ENERGIA's recent research on this topic, and hear directly from the researchers themselves on what their findings were, and not just that, but think through together how we can collectively integrate the takeaways into future program design, policy development, and research. So a couple of housekeeping things. You should be able to see in the bottom of your screen a question and answer function. Feel free to submit any questions that pop into your mind as the presentations go along, and we'll do our best to capture them and ask as many of them as possible, as many as time allows. Slides and a recording of today's discussion will be available online afterward. So we have a lot to cover, and so I'll go ahead and pass over to Anna Maria to get us started. Anna Maria, over to you.
Thank you very much. On behalf of ENERGIA, we're really glad to welcome you to this third webinar in our series on gender and energy access that ENERGIA is organized with SE4's People-Centered Accelerator. Could we move to the next slide? Yes, so we've had a series of 3 webinars on gender and energy access. And in these webinars, key experts are presenting new findings and learnings from ENERGIA's recent work on gender, energy, and poverty. And we really hope these findings will be useful to a broad audience of professional experts in the field of energy supply and those of you interested in reaching development goals. And we really look forward to discussing the implications of findings with you through our chat functions and through future communications on this topic. 2 webinars have already taken place, one on the impacts of energy, focusing on gendered impacts, and one on productive uses. Please do look up the links as there's a lot of information, and the previous webinars are online. And this webinar of today will focus on ways to advance a local economy by leveraging women's energy enterprises, because we all know that women do play a key role in expanding energy access in last mile communities, and yet they're still underrepresented in the energy product and in the energy service supply chain. In this webinar, the researchers will discuss the recent evidence of showing investing in women entrepreneurs is good for women and for their families and for business. And in addition, the presenters will share lessons from practitioners and practice on how best to support women energy entrepreneurs to maximize success. So we really hope this will be practical and useful for your current implementation. I would like to go to the next slide. A large part of what we're presenting today and what we've presented in the previous webinars is from a large gender and energy research program which has been funded by DFID. This was quite a unique program as it was really necessary to fill in the gaps of evidence. There's a lot of stories and anecdotal evidence, and this time we've had the opportunity to provide robust evidence on the interactions between gender, energy, and poverty to inform policy and practice. This research was done by 9 teams in 12 countries, 29 partners on different topics, including the final ones you see in this list, women in supply, which is really important. This year and the beginning of next year, we have an opportunity to reach out to you, to the community in policy and practice, both through our webinar series, also other products such as policy briefs, workshops, etc. So please do keep an eye out for us there. So to move on as quickly as we can to the actual presentations, I would like to present to you the experts who will be speaking to you today. We have Amanda Elam, who will be presenting work from one of the 7 teams we had. So this is team number 7, who worked on impact of entrepreneurship on women's lives and how this contributes to the SDG 7. Amanda is an expert on entrepreneurship, both from a research background as research fellow at the International Diana Research Institute at Babson College, and also, very interestingly, from her experience with leading her own company in medical diagnostics called Galaxy Diagnostics, and she's also an advisor of businesses. Throughout the past years, we've benefited a lot from her insights on women on entrepreneurship. They've provided lots of interesting and relevant discussions with the gender and energy community. The RA7 research team performed literature research, and this has led to identification of what is known already and where research is needed in the field of women and energy entrepreneurship. So she'll give you an introduction and highlights of that research. From the RA5 team, which was a team which did a randomized controlled trial on different business models, Rebecca Klega is now presenting the work. So thanks, Rebecca, for joining us. Rebecca is a researcher at the Environmental Policy Research Unit at the University of Cape Town. In the RA5 team, Rebecca led the implementation of lab experiments in rural Rwanda, and she brought together the quantitative findings from the RCT research and the qualitative insights from her fieldwork. And that bringing together of the quantitative and qualitative is something that we find very useful and relevant and leads to a lot of discussions and interesting findings. So thanks, Rebecca, for joining us. We also have Soma Dutta, who's presenting from the ENERGIA's Women Economic Empowerment Program. Soma Dutta is a senior technical advisor with 20 years of experience in energy and sustainable development issues. Most of you will know her already. She's one of the key experts in the energy network. She led ENERGIA's Scaling Up Energy Access through Women's Economic Empowerment Program, which was a separate program. And she brought together the lessons from the experience of this multi-year program in a report. And today she'll be presenting some of the key lessons from that work. So could we move to the next? All of this has been extensively mapped into different research outputs. So if you're interested, please do read up on our websites on the different works by the research areas, 5 and 7 that are presenting today, the border research program, and the work on women's economic empowerment. So we look forward to your discussions, and I now give the floor to the researchers themselves. So thank you.
Okay, so this is Amanda Elam. I'm starting with sharing some of the results from our report, RA7 report, Building the Evidence Base for Women's Energy Entrepreneurship. Next slide, please. So this research was actually conducted by Anita Shankar at Johns Hopkins University and Ali Glinsky at International Center for Research on Women, and then myself at Babson. And acknowledgements with some other people who helped us complete the lit review as well as the field work. The key questions that we were tasked with exploring in our literature review was looking at what evidence was available, showing that women's energy entrepreneurship can advance energy access for all, what evidence was available to support benefit for women's equality and their families, and also to look for evidence around best practices to support women's entrepreneurship within the energy sector. Our systematic lit review involved a search of the academic literature and gray literature from 1998 to 2018. We searched 15 databases using 15 predefined keywords, and the result was a small sample of 190 publications, largely gray literature. Next slide, please. So the highlights from our report, you can learn more by reading it, but it will give you an idea of what's in it. We found that overall there were very, very few academic publications. Most of the literature is gray literature. It's mostly prescriptive and descriptive with very little theoretical or methodological rigor. So in our report, we addressed that those shortcomings with a gender model based on some of the latest gender theory work, And we also provided some clear concept definitions. Entrepreneurship, business model, we offered some specifications that can help clarify how people are using these concepts in research and across literature. We also noted a pattern, especially in the gray literature, of using ghost citations. And what I mean by ghost citations is that citing works that support a declarative statement, like women's energy entrepreneurship leads to, better educational outcomes for children, but that the actual citations would go to things like speeches. So that's an example of where there's a low level of theoretical and methodological rigor in the literature right now. So we offer that as a caution. We also found that there was very little attention across studies to universal business concepts like market factors, business model, customer value proposition, and technology adoption. And this is critical because most programs are set up to measure impact, and impact is also often related to business performance. And business performance, we know in the business research, is often better predicted by those universal business factors than by the gender of the business owner. We also noted that we compared some of the gaps we identified in the women's energy entrepreneurship literature we noted could be filled with insights from the larger entrepreneurship literature. For example, focusing on varieties of entrepreneurship, so different definitions, but also, the extent to which entrepreneurship is solo, so self-employment, or it maybe involves internationalization or innovative new products rather than meeting basic needs. We also noted that there is a large literature in sustainability and entrepreneurship that could offer a lot of insights for energy entrepreneurship research, especially around social impact and fundraising. This is important because women entrepreneurs, we know, often emphasize social value, which has very important implications for business profitability, social and economic impact, and for industry and occupational patterns, which can come back to haunt programs, because if women are starting low margin businesses, the profitability numbers will be low, and that lowers impact for the support programs. Also, we noted that while there was a divide in the literature, right, developing countries tend to focus on informal entrepreneurship, whereas in developed countries, there's a big focus on formal institutions. Something unique in the international development research, and we think very important, is that there is a clear understanding that household power dynamics have a strong influence on women's owned businesses and outcomes, and that men's support is a critical resource, especially in male-dominated industries. This is definitely an area we'd like to see more research. And also, there's some exciting research coming out of the international development literature that is highly consistent with best practices around entrepreneurship education at the university level that we see in the developed countries. And one key concept there is the idea of personal agency, also described as personal initiative or entrepreneurial mindset, that we believe is an important component of any coaching and mentoring program and is key to overcoming social domination. Next slide, please. I think the most surprising finding for me as a business researcher involved in this project was when our team took a step back and looked at women's engagement in the energy sector. And we found that the way the term entrepreneurship was being used was not only imprecise, but could be misleading. So for example, in our fieldwork, a lot of the focus of the programs is on community-based self-help groups, community cooperatives, and energy businesses and microenergy entrepreneurs as important initiatives to address last mile poverty alleviation and energy access in the last mile populations, but paid very little attention to the potential benefits of investing entrepreneurial support programming efforts directed at small and medium-sized energy enterprises and high potential energy enterprises, where with women's leadership, where you have a lot of job creation, so a lot of training and a lot of employment opportunities for different communities. In the community cooperatives, for example, we saw concerns around business models because some of those community cooperatives were actually focused on families, not women business owners, and often were, you know, their business model, the way the money ran, they came in, it was pooled and it was shared among the participants in the cooperative, and there was no off-ramp. There was no way for the members to graduate and go on to start and run their own businesses. So it was a good poverty alleviation strategy, but not clear how it really contributes to economic development beyond providing jobs. We made those same observations when it came to some of the sales agent networks where you have freelance sales agents. The business model really matters. Where does the money run? Next slide, please. So to close the loop, a few considerations for research and policymaking. We urge you to think very carefully about the type of entrepreneurship, where to spend your resources and your time. High potential businesses can grow really large and create a lot of jobs, and it can put women into the industry leadership positions, which can transform an industry. If you're focusing at the local business level, again, there can be, and with SMEs, there can be a lot of job creation and a lot of benefits to women's equality and local leadership. And then subsistence is definitely important to have those poverty alleviation initiatives, but think very carefully about where the off-ramp is. How can people graduate out of those programmings to enter the local market with their own enterprises? Again, these different types of entrepreneurship are they occur in different resource environments. They involve different types of market factors and customer value propositions. So really important to think carefully about those. We also urge you to consider the gender concentration by industry and business types. So occupational and industry segregation are important predictors of gender differences in business performance and in business startup. Women generally start businesses in less profitable markets, and it's really unfair to compare women and men across industries or even within the energy sector across product types or market niches when those market factors could be that predict business performance could be very different. So be careful when you're comparing apples to oranges. Family power dynamics, again, we urge you to think very carefully about the family power dynamics and how they could potentially influence business ownership and control, and the role that men can play in helping advance women's entrepreneurship. And that could require, you know, helping them appreciate, this is in the household, the husbands and also the male community leaders appreciate the benefits of having successful women business owners in their community and joining in the leadership of their household and community. We urge you also to educate based on the existing evidence that women make excellent business leaders. There's a tremendous literature out there supporting that in women's business leadership. I am happy to direct you towards resources if you're looking. But we hope that that message is made clear in presentations to the women and training initiatives for the women, and also any involvement of the men, whether husbands or local community leaders. The evidence is clear. Women make excellent business leaders. And then finally, personal agency and empowerment training. We know from the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor and many other studies that confidence and self-efficacy, so believing in yourself, is an important quality in all entrepreneurs. It's a tough journey. It's like climbing a mountain to build a business that is profitable. The number one reason for discontinuing a business, according to the GEM data, is because the business is not profitable. The second reason is because it's hard to obtain financing. And I think that it is clear from a theoretical standpoint, the gender research and theory making is really clear that women really need personal agency to overcome the social domination they meet in society, in their own homes, in their own communities, when it comes to doing growing and starting businesses that may kind of go against the local norms and ideals and expectations surrounding gender. That's all. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Amanda. That was very interesting. I think we should move right on to the next presentation by Rebecca, and we'll have a question and answer to Amanda's presentation throughout the sessions, and we can answer them all afterwards. Thank you. Rebecca, welcome.
Thank you, everyone, and thanks for joining once again. So RFI has been working on actively looking at inclusion of women in the energy supply sector and its impact on performance and household livelihoods. Next slide, please. So to do this, we actually partnered with a social enterprise by name Nuru Energy. Nuru Energy is a private energy company that has operations in East Africa. We focused on the country Rwanda, and as a way of background, before the start of our project, Nuru Energy already had entrepreneurs working in Rwanda, but we saw that out of the entrepreneurs that were actively working, we had only 19% that were women. And for us, this was very worrying, given that this is a country that has been actively looking at gender equality in their country. So to try to bridge this gap in the supply sector, energy supply sector, we actually set up entrepreneurs, recruited new entrepreneurs, but this time around we made sure that we had equal representation of gender, such that we had 50% females and 50% males in the new business model. And to look at this, we targeted 272 villages in rural Rwanda, and specifically we look at the district Rulindo and Ruangwa districts. In each of these villages, 272 villages, we had one micro enterprise. This one micro enterprise was owned by 4 people. So they worked in a team, our entrepreneurs worked in the team. But because we were focused on gender, we made sure that this team were either all female. So in one micro enterprise, we had 4 people working, and they were either all females, all males, or a mixed gender team. In a mixed gender team, that means you have 2 males, 2 females working in these teams. And on your screen, you can see this light that is being connected to a meter-looking type of device. So these were the lights that were distributed in these villages, and the entrepreneurs were supposed to charge these lights for their customers at a fee. So the meter-like device, we call them the octopuses, and that was like the working toolkit for our entrepreneurs. And to be able to power this device, the solar panel that you see the lady holding on your bottom screen was used to power this device. And in a situation where the solar arrays were not that strong, we also used a pedal you see at the bottom on your right. In all, we wanted to test the gender quotas of our business models. How did they impact welfare, such as pro-social expenditures like schooling, health, and other welfare indicators. We also looked at the uptake of the light. How frequently did customers come to recharge their light? We also looked at other behavioral measures, such as the competitiveness or risk-taking abilities of our entrepreneurs. In a whole, we combined qualitative and quantitative analysis, also looking at experimental data. Now let's go to the next slide. A key insight from our study, I'll start with the barriers affecting uptake. We realized that price was really important when it comes to how frequently people went to recharge their light. Such that at the point where we were offering, we were paying the full market price for recharging the light. We saw that people were not really coming out to recharge their light. But when we subsidized it, we realized that uptake actually increased. Secondly, Rwanda is a very hilly country, and as such, because we only had one enterprise in a village, we had to walk quite some distance to access the recharge stations, which did not help in uptake. So these are insights that if we want to expand such a business model, we want to look at. However, the positives were that we saw a massive shift from the use of kerosene lamp to the Nuru light. which was very good, meaning we like the normal health impact associated with using dirty fuels reduced. In terms of welfare indicators, we also saw that children's study time improved, relative income also increased, and there was a sense of security in the villages. In terms of business performance that I'm going to delve in other subsequent slide, we see that we had similar performances between male teams and female teams. And in terms of competitiveness, female also showed the same level of competitiveness with males. Although for risk taking, we saw that we had some differences when it comes to gender. Finally, our insights also told us that social status of women improved, as we were not only empowering them economically, but we had some social empowerment also happening. Now let's move to the next slide, where I take you through how women as entrepreneurs, energy entrepreneurs actually performed. Now, from what we saw was that when we compare female teams to male teams and the mixed teams, we didn't see any difference in their business performance. Business performance here was quantified as so the number of times they recharge lights for people. And for us, this is a very good indicator, given that hey, when we include women into all this, the supply side of the energy aspects, we don't see them performing worse off than their counterparts. And we also already know the benefits associated in including women in such business models. So including them, if we've shown that their sales are equal, that means that the private, this is a very good take-home message for the private sector. And this has other spillover effects, such as household expenditure. We tried to, in your graph, we tried to compare the household expenditure for people that were actual entrepreneurs to those that were not entrepreneurs. And we saw after the program, we were able to see that their household expenditure for food, non-lighting expenditures in the reports, you see things like health and education were improved, which gives us how just empowering them by including them in the supply sector, how that can affect households and help us in alleviating poverty. Next slide, please. Yeah, also for risk taking, like I said, we saw differences between males and females, saying that males had more risk taking abilities. However, because our business model was such that they were working in a team, we were able to hedge against this type of risk aversion or not able to take risks. So the risks, their ability not to take risks did not have any negative impact on sales. As such, they had equal performance, business performance, and male counterpart. That tells us that even no matter how vulnerable may seem, involving them, if we have the right business model, we'll be able to bring them on board, which will also help us trickle down to the household level. Secondly, with competitiveness, statistically, we do not see any differences between them, even though the graph shows a slight increase for men. We see that when we test it statistically, we say that men are as competitive as women, which is very good for the private sector, because if we have a woman being as competitive as their men, they are going to take on roles as their men and will yield the same profit as their male counterparts. Next slide, please. And now let's look at the spillover effect of women inclusion in the energy sector. Generally, the women we dealt with were subsistence farmers, and coming on board as entrepreneurs gave them extra income and supplemented the household needs, which we feel that it's very important. Secondly, they now felt like they belonged and they now had the exposure. They met a lot of people and they now had some high level of social status in the community. On your screen, you will see that's Melanie narrating her story to me. For her, becoming a VLE, she now gets to meet a lot of people. People come to her for advice. She's now trusted, and she thinks she can even contest for a village leader. And this is a very take-home message, saying that look, not only about the income or the financial aspect, including them means that they get a sense of belongingness, and they are able to take on other roles that will benefit the community. apart from their aspirations or their aspiration increasing, their aspiration for children, their own children also increased. If we compare the entrepreneurs in the female entrepreneurs in the team to those who were not entrepreneurs, you see that for them, they feel that their children should still be in school in 3 years' time. But unlike those that didn't take on the entrepreneurial role, this wasn't the case. That tells us that it's not only about them, but even children in the household will benefit from the fact that their parents are entrepreneurs, since they also have increased aspirations for their children. And this is where I'll end it. And the next slide, please. If you want to learn more about our research, kindly go to this website and you'll find many more. Thank you very much. And my name is Rebecca Pege. Thank you.
Shall I start?
Thank you so much. Yes, please do.
All right. Thank you and greetings, everyone. So complementing ENERGIA's research program, it has also been implementing the Women's Economic Empowerment Program, which is an implementation program of supporting last mile women's energy entrepreneurship for the last several years. And in 2018, the ENERGIA Secretariat, together with most of the people in the country teams, undertook a process of reflection. And today in this presentation, I'd like to share some of the findings of that reflection. Next, please. So the WE program, as we call it, scales up proven women-centric energy business models in 2 areas, in clean energy and in productive uses of energy. And we worked with, as part of this, we worked with over 4,000 women entrepreneurs in 7 countries, which you can see in the map. And we've had, I must admit, a lot of failures, but some of the successes are that a lot of them, a good percentage of them recorded a very high profit, recorded positive profit margins. I won't say high, but positive and consistent. We've had very few defaults on loans. And most importantly, that a large number of them have been in operation for at least 2 years at the end of 2017. Together, these women entrepreneurs, mostly micro entrepreneurs, have sold a range of products, starting from pico to large solar technologies, clean cooking, also worked on productive use applications such as solar dryers, refrigerators, etc., and reached almost 3 million people in rural, mostly rural, but definitely remote last mile markets. Next, please. So what is the WE approach? Basically, it is building women's entrepreneurship towards in the last mile areas through an integrated support package that combines inputs in technical, business, and leadership areas, skill building in these, together with sustained coaching and mentorship. We've also built linkages with a large number of relevant actors in energy value chains and in other value chains, which is important, especially for productive users of energy. And we've also worked on strengthening the environment in which these women entrepreneurs worked through a host of measures. Next, please. So I'm trying to compress here a lot of experience into a few slides and 10 minutes. So I'm just going to take a few sample strategies and lessons. So starting with the first, an early question in developing any women's entrepreneurship program is, who is likely to be a good entrepreneur? And this is important because typically 40 to 60% dropout rates in an entrepreneurship program is not uncommon. So what we found that women who are connected socially are ideally suited, even if they are not working full-time on energy businesses. So we've also found that entrepreneurship skills and business skills is something that can be imparted, and level of education has not really been a deciding factor in the success of these entrepreneurs. Mobility, however, has been, and we've seen, we have data to show that women who have access to either bicycles or motorcycles have actually managed to sell much more than, sell almost the tune of double of those who don't. So mobility is an important factor. This is not necessarily a selection criteria, but definitely an area that must be included in program development. We've also seen that women who work in groups, who have an experience of working in groups, they work well for a variety of reasons. The most basic being that they typically have initial investment, but they also are seen to have financial disciplines. They are able to reap economies of scales, and oftentimes they work in sisterhood, so they're able to help each other. The second bucket that is important is as to what skills need to be built when you're working with women entrepreneurs. And in this, of course, technology, business skills, bookkeeping, all of that, basic troubleshooting, etc., are important. But we've also found that agency and leadership is extremely important, and these are skills that can be built. We do have tools that help us build these skills among entrepreneurs. So by grit, we really mean that at the end of the day, the entrepreneur has to have the grit and the drive to negotiate with a supplier, to deal with a difficult customer, to go to the next county and talk to strangers, even negotiate within families to make that necessary investment, etc. Support, like we said, is important, and we find that the women entrepreneurs themselves are a great source of support to each other. So as a strategy, ENERGIA and its partners developed what Solar Sister calls sisterhood groups, but to support each other. And we find that once you start that, they not only build economies of scales and business relationships, but in fact, relationships that go far beyond businesses. The next area is mentor services, and we find that providing mentor support is an absolutely critical factor when it comes to working with women. These are women that are working in remote areas. They don't often see each other. So to have a connection point and an expert critical friend really helps. So the mentor does a whole lot of things apart from being a good friend, identifying new opportunities, markets, helping entrepreneurs negotiate with the financing institutions, engaging with local authorities, etc. But basically demystifying business for them. An important lesson that we've learned is that the mentorship services, the kind of services that are required of a mentor, change as businesses grow. You typically start with a very high need for technology demystification, but as you go along, its expansion, it's reaching new areas and support and those sorts of things that become important. Next, please. Some lessons in marketing and distribution and finance. So as we all know, building last mile markets is extremely challenging for a variety of reasons: low level of consumer awareness, distances, remoteness, affordability, etc. Now, in our experience, it is these very features of last mile markets that make women good candidates to operate their energy businesses. What we found is that women are typically very good at trust-based selling, and as against general market campaigns, general product campaigns, what we find is that targeted one-on-one selling works much better with women. Another point is messaging that is very closely linked to local or topical issues, be it children's health and safety in case of improved stoves, or the prevailing cost of paraffin or alternative fuels, etc., are very important selling points. Finally, in marketing, we've seen that even though it's expensive, it's worthwhile to invest in cloud-based data management systems because, of course, they're extremely useful in order to track sales. But the other very, very important function is related to programming in terms of customizing support to the entrepreneurs. Who's not selling, why they're not selling, what kind of support they need, etc. Distribution in last mile markets, as we know, is a huge issue. And we worked in areas where the products have to be shipped to a central island and then to another smaller ship to another island, and then a smaller truck and then a motorbike. So there's also an issue of a huge time lag oftentimes between product ordering and it actually being received and delivered to the final customer. So for us, what has worked well is locally based suppliers, who have a good local distribution networks, who have local offices and warehouses. We've also found that it's important to negotiate at least medium-term prices of products, because, as you know, and in these markets, the prices are extremely, the markets are extremely price sensitive. So that has to be taken into account. In finance, finance is, of course, extremely important, but we've seen that by itself, it's definitely not the silver bullet that'll solve all problems. Access to finance must necessarily be accompanied by a host of other measures, starting with financial literacy, managing cash flows, debts, assets, business development services, consistent business growth, and all of that. And all of these are extremely important in order to build the confidence of the financial institutions who are likely to lend them. In Nepal, our entrepreneurs were able to raise through 35 or 40 local financing institutions an amount of almost euro 300,000, which was very useful. Locally adapted financing mechanisms works well. And so we've again had a host of financing mechanisms, which are all very, very context specific. That has worked well. Next, please. Okay, so going beyond individual strategies, very quickly, some programmatic lessons. We've learned that building and strengthening the enabling environment is just as important as the direct support to entrepreneurs. And by this, we mean, of course, generalized kind of enabling environment aspects like the ease of doing business for women, but also industry standards, quality certification, harmonization of policies between programs working in the same area is extremely important. We've also seen that the programs like these cannot be built without multi-year flexible support. As we went along, we made plenty of mistakes. We've learned from them. And what I'm presenting today is actually is sort of synthesized into what works and what doesn't, but it's based on a lot of failures too. Aggregation is very, very important function at all levels, be it whether you have 100 women entrepreneurs that you're working with, you need to aggregate them into a viable package for a financial institution to be interested in, whether it is combining several country projects into a bigger program, which helps to seek multi-year funding, but also to exchange of lessons. Our best entrepreneurs have been the ones that have support from their men and from the spouses and families. And just because it's a women's entrepreneurship program, it doesn't have to be exclusionary, and we found support from families and men extremely useful. And finally, as we've gone along, we've worked with a lot of strategies. We've seen that the strategies have to be really calibrated, because at different stages of growth for different products and different geographies, the specific strategies that you need to work with women entrepreneurs are completely different and context specific. Thank you. I will stop here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Soma. Anna Maria may have comments, but she's not able to be heard right now. So I will move us toward our Q&A session. And I think there were a lot of really interesting threads that kind of wove through 2, if not 3 of these presentations. I'm really intrigued around personal agency being one, engaging men and families. And so I'm hoping maybe Soma and Amanda, both of you could speak a bit about those 2 elements that sort of resonated for me as critical elements of making an entrepreneurship support program work. What does that actually entail? What is, if you are conducting a personal agency training, what are the components of that? How is that operationalized? And then similar on the engaging kind of men and families, recognizing that their perspective and how they relate to this plays such a critical role. Again, what are the kind of conversations that need to be had, and who has those conversations? So maybe Amanda, you first, and then interested to hear from Soma as well.
So I think Soma should go first because she has more experience in the context we're focusing on, and then I can talk about what we're doing in more developed context. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great. Great.
How do I unmute? Am I? Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So, agency. Yes, when I used to go on monitoring missions, the one thing everyone remembers is the Tree of Life. So there are tools, and some of these are actually developed by some people in the group here on agency and empowerment that have worked well. But what we found is that we need to customize them to the country context. We also need to shorten them. So for example, in working with the Empowered Entrepreneurs Handbook, in Kenya, they've picked up just a few modules which they've integrated into their mentorship program. So that is it. So it is basically about leadership. It is about, like I said, this tool called Tree of Life, which helps people to think through what they want to do and why they're not able to do it if they're not able to do it, and so on. So that is basically what I would say in personal agency. We've had different stories in different countries. In working with men, ENERGIA's partner strategies has actually been to work with, to position the program as with women at the center of it, but men and spouses very much a part of the discussion. So even when we have when we had the first discussions with communities, it was never women's meetings. It was with the families. The discussions was with the families. And especially when it comes to productive uses of energy and when the investments requirements are large, it's just makes practical sense to also engage the men and the men and rest of the family members. We've also found that family members, including young boys, young girls, are good at certain functions. Cousins, husbands are good at certain functions that women necessarily may not be. So often as these businesses grow, we find that women hire other people, including men, as what they call downlines or in a relay system to take the products to the other markets, to help to engage young boys and girls to market these products through social media, etc. So those are some ways in which men has been engaged. So basically it is taking them from the beginning, positioning it differently, not necessarily as something that only women should do. And at the end of the day, there's enough room for everyone to work in, and everyone benefits, the family benefits. So yeah, let's stop there.
Thank you, Soma. So I think that was an excellent summary of the experience on the ground. The shorter, the more customized to the specific context, to the specific product market that these individuals are looking to operate businesses in. I think personal agency, what I want everyone to know is that personal agency, as it's developed, as it's sort of addressed by the Empowered Entrepreneurship Training Curriculum, which offers sort of a short boot camp for women entrepreneurs and other entrepreneurs, is consistent with research going on in the larger entrepreneurship literature around the concepts of personal initiative and entrepreneurial mindset. So in the universities, everyone's talking about entrepreneurial mindset, coaching and mentoring programs, and the whole idea there is you can learn the business skills, but it might not be enough to persist through the startup process, through survival to success. And that the mentorship, so connecting you to the resources you need in the environment, is incredibly important. And then the coaching is really more how you as an individual can make things happen. And so the personal initiative work is coming out of a research program led by Michael Fries. And he's tested this program with random control trials the same way that the team that developed the Empowered Entrepreneurship Training Program. And he's also tested that in developing contexts. And the results are consistent, not quite as good as what we've seen with the Empowered Entrepreneurship Training Program, but very consistent. And so I think that idea of addressing personal agency and helping individuals figure out in their personal situation how they take the next step. you know, designing that roadmap for their specific business, for their specific context is actually really important and very challenging to manage at scale, right? So there's a lot of interest in figuring out ways to use technology because the boot camp's important, but the need for support and training doesn't end there, right? So incubators cultivate their alumni lists, and they, in the developing context, we cultivate our alumni lists, and we do ongoing programming so the entrepreneurs can come back for support when they encounter specific challenges as they are growing their businesses. So I think that agency is really important, and it really links to the confidence. So the belief that you have the skills to start and to grow in business, your confidence that if you fail, that you can overcome that failure and start again, or, you know, or find a better, pivot the business and find a more profitable business model. So personal agency is consistent with what is happening in a lot of the university-based trainings. At Babson, our program specifically is very experiential education. So we've been there for a long time, knowing that entrepreneurs need this kind of support infrastructure, that it really is about self-efficacy, confidence, personal agency, and that their needs don't end when they leave the classroom, right? So that's one thing. In terms of men's involvement, one of the things that we've struggled a lot with around women's leadership programming and women's entrepreneurship training is that the women want it, but we don't have a lot of data to show that they derive any more benefit from participating in women-only program versus mixed programming. Of course, there's a lot of self-selection going on. So it may be that the individuals who wouldn't do well in mixed gender programming are thriving in the women-only programming. And the women who do well working in programming with men will go for that. What we do know from a social network standpoint in the research around entrepreneurship is that women have a tendency to have less powerful networks, and the most powerful ties they have are often men, right? Who have more connections in the marketplace, who have more, who have larger, looser tie networks, whereas women tend to have very concentrated, strong tie networks, which I don't think women should feel bad about. I think it's tied to our family roles, right? Taking care of children, taking care of older family members, that we need those high trust, strong ties to get the kind of support we need for that job. The problem is in business, we really need bigger, weaker tie networks so we can mobilize resources and get answers to our questions across a broad variety of needs: accounting, banking, legal advice, distribution, you know, product development, R&D, whatever. We have these broad needs, and we need a big network, diverse network, in order to do that. So women face some challenges there. So there may be benefits to women, depending on the kind of business they start, to really work in a group, in an environment where it isn't totally like focused women only, but they have some they have men that who can also mentor them. The piece that I don't understand well, and I think Soma has a better idea about, is how you broach the household dynamics piece of it, where you get the husbands involved, because we don't do that in developed context, right? Women really are treated as autonomous individuals who are starting their own business. We do have a lot of research on family business, and the news there isn't great. When men control things, they don't pay their women and children. When women lead the businesses, they employ their husbands and children and pay them. So I hope that's helpful.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks so much, Amanda. I'm just looking at the clock, and we've had a good handful of questions. So I'm thinking I might just put them all on the table and then let our panelists kind of pick and choose what we respond to. So, some are very cut and dried, like probably lightning round type questions. For instance, Soma, was the finance research disaggregated by the type of finance? That was a question that came in from Shine. There was interest in why women choose less profitable business segments. I think that gets to the Amanda, your comment about women kind of choose social impact businesses, but is there a reason why they're not going for the higher profit? Just a quick answer on that, if possible. And then what are the best ways to develop markets that might not already exist? That is maybe a bigger question that we won't have time to fully dive into. The fourth and final question that I think also deserves so much airtime, and we'll just squeeze it in here, but it's a comment that Joy Clancy raised. And Joy is, of course, extremely familiar with this research program, having played a kind of a steering role. But it's a question that I had on my mind as well, which is around the failures, some that you mentioned, right? That all programs experience failure, but what gets talked about are the successes, of course, because that's what the program funders demand. But there's so much value in sharing information about what didn't work and why. So I interested in your comments on what hasn't worked and whether and how that's getting documented such that others can learn. So I know that's a lot, but hopefully maybe if we go one by one and each of the panelists can address the appropriate kind of pieces of those questions. Amanda, we'll start with you, and then Rebecca, and then Soma, you'll get the last word.
Okay, so give me a place to start. Which question would you like me to address?
Maybe really quickly on the why do women start businesses in less profitable markets, and then address the failures.
Yeah. So the quick answer on why women start different businesses is they are drawn to education and healthcare, where the profit margins tend to be lower. You're serving, obviously, teachers aren't paid very much, nurses aren't paid very much. You're trying to keep costs low for the consumer. It's really a service ideal that drives women to do that. They just want their costs covered. Whereas you get into high technology, where you're solving problems, especially for business to business, men are more likely to start B2B companies, where they're developing enterprise solutions, and monetization is really based on the value to the company. So if you come up with for example, a new software system that allows the company to reduce the number of people they need to hire to do something, that can save the company a lot of money, and they'll pay a lot of money for it. If you can save them, they'll pay, say they can cut their labor costs by 50% by using this software automation, then you could charge, half of that savings, because they would take that. And women don't tend to start those businesses. When they do very well. Some qualifications to that is it depends on the mindset coming in, but women tend to carry this social ideal into business. So we have some evidence, for example, that some women are less aggressive in the way they monetize a product, the same way that they're less aggressive in the way that they monetize themselves. So women tend not to ask for salaries that are super high, and they tend not to overvalue. I mean, there's a lot of rhetoric that women undervalue, but maybe the problem is that men overvalue themselves and overvalue their business solutions. So that's what contributes to the lower profit margins. And then in terms of the question around developing markets, I'll say very quickly, a place to start to look at that is it has a lot to do with the needs of the market, the awareness of the solution. Does the solution actually solve a problem that is a big priority for the market? And then the other thing, of course, is infrastructure, right? Can the entrepreneurs reach their customers? Where are their customers? And that has a lot to do with, distribution needs. So communications, transportation, networks, that kind of thing. And anything else?
Oh, that's great, Amanda. Thank you so much. Thank you. And Rebecca, I'll pass to you for maybe a minute or two of comments.
Okay, I would like to address the failures. with our project, one thing we were not able to answer was the sustainability of our business model, especially given that we were dealing with the social enterprise who, one way or the other, had enough funding once in a while. So if we take that out, our question is like, how can we sustain such a business model given that we deliberately set this up? So that is something I think we should look at, and something that we shouldn't just under the cupboard. It would be very good for us to be able to address that, to see how best such business models like ours can be sustained, given the real impact or benefit that we see from the project. Yeah, I think I'll just end it shortly and move, give the chance to Summer to continue. Thanks.
Okay, my turn. So on the less profitable, why women are focused on less profitable businesses, I think the main reason is that the main reason I think is the time commitment that they can give because of their multiple responsibilities that they have. They're also risk averse, as Rebecca pointed out, more risk averse. Through this, we find that they mitigate to some extent by diversifying their the product and services that they sell. There's also the question of being the ability to make investment, the initial investment from within the families, which is limited in the case of women. All of these really restrict the kind of businesses that by themselves they would be able to get into. Of course, with support from organizations, it can be done. Expanding markets, I think what Amanda said about selling solutions is most important. We find that when we've been able to customize solutions to a specific need, that has worked well. And very systematic market assessments to do that has helped. In certain areas, we've started to sell solar lighting for lighting, but we found that lanterns are very useful in attracting fish. So that's how it was sold eventually. So that works. Demonstration-based selling also works well in rural areas. As far as the failures are concerned, oh, you name it and we've done it. We've practically made all mistakes that were possible. So some of them were that we started with when we were looking for entrepreneurs, we looked for a certain level of education, and that automatically ruled out a whole lot of people who were otherwise very good, but they just didn't have that education yet. When we were selecting entrepreneurs, we started with sort of open calls. That didn't work well. So we went in for one-to-one recommendations, and somebody referring a friend who's also good or referring somebody else, that sort of thing worked very well. We also expected a huge time commitment from them. We looked for full-time businesses. That didn't work well. I think one of our glaring mistakes was that we did some of the things that we did, ENERGIA did in the beginning, were in a very NGO mode, civil society mode. So we did market assessments, but market assessments at times failed to and did not capture some of the very key competition related data. So what we really needed to do was a very hard-nosed business market assessment. So that was again one mistake that we did. Why do women drop out? Mostly because of vulnerability, I would say. I mean, these are small businesses. These are businesses that will fail because a child has to be admitted to a hospital or for treatment, and money is required for that. So that's one. The second is that when working with women's businesses at the micro level, the business model has to be such that it can cater for it. It can work with small scales of business. I think we have to be prepared for that. This is not to say that we shouldn't be working towards growth, but the business model has to essentially incorporate that within its framework. That's it. Yeah.
Great. Wonderful job, you guys. And I recognize we went a couple minutes over, but thanks to everyone for sticking with us. I think it was definitely worth it to hear from all the panelists. So unfortunately, Anna Maria isn't able to turn on her audio because of construction noise. So just on her behalf and on behalf of the ENERGIA team, want to convey my thanks and their thanks for everyone's participation, invite everyone to pick up on the background documents that, that convey the research that underlie the presentations, and then also step back and look to the future, right? So let's, as a group, as a community who cares about this, how do we take the research and outputs from this program forward? How do we engage in data and evidence collection that's disaggregated by gender? And then, very importantly, how do we optimize the benefits of including women in programming and entrepreneurship, as well as the benefits of energy services to women? So thank you again to all the panelists, all the participants. We wish you all the best and look forward to working with you all as we move forward. So we'll send around an email after this that will have a link to the recording, a link to the slides. There are some other webinar series that we've spotted. I think Gender and Energy Access is having a moment. That's very exciting. So we'll share the information we've seen on that in case there's interest. So with that, I will close us out for today and have a great day. We wish you the best.